Even leave the road, the first way it was even better than now. Now there is very, 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 very bad.
When it rains, the rain always fill here with water, mosquitoes all over the place.
The name of the company is a Sisala word called Batuawisi. Batuawisi Sisala means they are not God. So it gave me a sense that this owner is from the area. And when I did my checks, I got to know who exactly the owner was.
I know there's a process to unearth who the director of a company is. And so there's a legal process. But what I can state as a matter of fact is that I personally is not a director of the company. There will be conflict of interest. Once it's your brother or even any close associate, you have interest. You want the success of the person.
Tumu is a small village in the Upper West region. The roads here are terrible. Gullies, ditches and gutters formed in the middle of the road, making this narrow stretch difficult to maneuver.
When it's time for customers to come and buy things, if you are not lucky, they will wet all your body with dirty water.
However, on 22nd July 2019, Batosi Company Limited was awarded a contract by the Upper West Regional Coordinating Council to rehabilitate 5.7 kilometers of selected roads in Tumu. The contract sum was over 12 million cedis. The Batosi Company Limited was supposed to have gone to the site on 22nd November 2019. The firm issued its notice to commence work on 5th December 2019 and complete the road projects on 4th June 2021. 8 weeks after the commencement, the company failed to mobilize to site to commence work, contrary to its program of work. Today, the bridges constructed by the contractor remain flooded and partially buried under weeds. The culverts are choked with silts and weeds. It has left in its trail dissatisfaction and agony to many traders who ply their trade in Tumu and in the Sisala East District. The Upper West Department of Urban Roads Office pegs the progress of work at less than 2%. Nashiru Nashara, a trader, says the current state of the road is affecting their business.
When it's time for customers to come and buy things, if you are not lucky, they will wet all your body with dirty water. Even mosquitoes, the way they bite us here, you can't even sit for 5 minutes. You yourself, I hope you can see. Now whether it's damp, it's river, we don't know. We don't know. First, like if they even leave the road, the first way it was even better than now. Now there is very, 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 very bad.
This assertion was corroborated by a middle-aged trader, Mumuni Maria. She's appalled by the state of the road and wants swift government intervention.
I won't be another one. Oh, yeah, well, man.
That when it rains, customers always come back, not as much as how it was to be first.
This road contract was awarded to the Batosi Company Limited barely 3 months after the Roads and Highway Ministry issued the company with a certificate to commence work. According to records from the Registrar General's Department, the Batosi Company Limited was set up on the 12th of April 2017, barely a month after Parliament's Appointment Committee approved the nomination of the then Deputy Upper West Regional Minister, Amidu Ishahaku Chania. The directors of the company were Abdul Basak Chania, the Deputy Minister's brother, Ulatunji Amuda, his cousin, and Dimbi Yaya, his driver. Executive Director of Community Development Alliance Ghana, Salifu Isifu Canton, has been advocating the rehabilitation of the selected town roads. As an indigene of Tumu, he says the frustrations of the people are evident in their disappointment in successive governments. But according to him, the state of the roads and the circumstances surrounding how the contract was awarded raised concerns of conflict of interest.
In fact, when I had conversations with the people I knew to be behind that company, because the name of the company is a Sisala word called Batuawese. Batuawese in Sisala means they are not God. So it couldn't have been any other person who had registered a company and put the Sisala name there. It would look weird because Sisala is not a very common language in Ghana. It's actually a minority language. So it gave me a sense that this owner is from the area. And when I did my checks, I got to know who exactly the owner was. And I was convinced beyond doubt that the owner was somebody who also have a duty of care to actually ensure that that particular road contracts were done as part of his schedule, as part of his work. And he has supervisory jurisdiction over ensuring that government initiative succeeded. And then he found himself also as an actor who he's supposed to supervise. That's with the capacity to actually play that actorship role in the delivery of the road.
He said that selected town roads earmarked for rehabilitation is a game changer and in opening up Tumu Township to business.
For those particular roads, they were really critical roads that will open up the town and be of significant benefit to the people. Some of them were connecting town roads, access to the market, the main market center, which have no access routes except a few very crowded areas. But through the Chief Palace, the main entrance to the Chief Palace, there's a link that accesses the Tumu main market. Part of it was part of the road. If you go to a place we call Mandela Road, there's a bridge there. In fact, I just saw yesterday it's heavily flooded. There was supposed to be a bridge there that opens up that place and links the daily market through the Nyaminjan corridor.
So that was an excerpt from Monday's Hotline documentary, forgive me, Caught in Conflict. Now, the deputy minister at the center of this controversy, Mr. Isahaku Chinia, agreed to speak to us after the documentary, but he did not. The following day, he agreed to appear on the show. He did not. He did, however, speak on GH1 the following day, and this is what he said.
For somebody to win a contract, is there any evidence that during that process are interfered, are influenced? If those facts are there, then you can say that my private interest conflicted with my public interest as a public officer. We should not be emotional about issues to the extent that we forget that guidelines and then there are rules governing institutions, and individuals have the right to within the law to operate. If a company owes and you think I am the owner and I am owing, why don't you write it to me? If they say like time you owe, why should they write to Mr. Jantua? Ask Mr. Jantua, is it Mr. Jantua who is owing? And the company is a legal separate entity that dealt with the ministry. So it's full of mischief. People should not allow hate, and witch hunt to lead their judgment.
Yep, that was the voice of Mr. Isahaku Chinia. He's the Deputy Sanitation Minister, and he's at the center of controversy following the Joy News documentary, Caught in Conflict, which revealed that a month after he became Deputy Regional Minister, his brother, his cousin, and his driver formed a company that won contracts from government, contracts which have issues with the execution. Let's speak to a procurement specialist, Kobina Ata-Bedu, on the issues that arise from this matter. Mr. Ata-Bedu, thank you for your time. Good morning.
Good morning, Kojo, and good morning to your listeners.
So Mr. Chinia's response is that there's no evidence that he participated in the awarding of the road contract from the region where he was Deputy Regional Minister. He does admit that he's the one who led the company to get the Planting for Food and Jobs contract. He admits to that, but he says he didn't lead them to get the roads contract. Therefore, there's no wrongdoing, there's no conflict. In terms of procurement law, is this accurate?
Okay. Now, before we get into the issues, let's set the context or the framework. Now, this issue has to do with two basic concepts. The concept of conflict of interest, which is a corporate governance issue, and then procurement processes, and the breach of which we will now look at. Now, let's look at the issue of conflict of interest and corporate governance. Within corporate governance, there is the element of principal-agent relationship. And that is called the principal-agent dilemma, where a person is placed in a position to act in the interest of a principal. So if I have to bring this into this issue, the principal is the state. The agent is the minister. Now, here is what the Constitution says about public officers. In Article 288, it says, in this chapter, unless the context otherwise requires, a public officer means a person who holds a public office. Now, that defines a public officer. Come to 284 of the Constitution. It says, a public officer shall not put himself in a position where his personal interest conflicts or is likely to conflict with the performance of the functions of the office. So, in this instance, if he says nothing happened, in conflict of interest, there is the actual event of the conflict occurring, or there's a potential conflict of interest. That is why the Constitution recognizes that it's likely to happen. So, the question now that needs begs asking is, didn't he know that there was a potential for a conflict of interest? When his brother, his cousin, and his driver formed the company, immediately after he was appointed, in pursuit of government business, did he say he doesn't know or he didn't know? And at what point did he know? And when he found out, what steps did he take? The general principle in corporate governance, when it comes to conflict of interest, as soon as you identify that there is a potential for conflict of interest, you are supposed to declare it. Can he produce evidence that he declared it? If he didn't declare it, at what point did he find it necessary to lead them to go and pursue a contract from Planting for Food and Jobs? Now, is there the likelihood that he may have done the same for the procurement of the road contract?
He says he did not.
In conflict governance, there is what is called influence peddling. So it means that he doesn't necessarily have to be a director. But once he is in a position of trust and a position of authority, the people closest to him can peddle their influence or their relationship with him to their benefit. So is it possible that his cousins were using his name to procure those contracts? That is the reason why in corporate governance we will say that when you are in a position, your immediate family, which is your wife, your children, your father, your mother, your brothers and sisters, are not supposed to be in the line of conflict, which means if you do business here, they are not supposed to go anywhere near it. And if they have to go anywhere near it, because as individuals, they have a human right to pursue business, you are supposed to declare it beforehand. Now, in his position as a public officer, he is a deputy minister. The regional coordinating council by procurement law is a procurement entity. The head of the entity is the regional minister. If the regional minister is not there, he is the deputy. The regional minister delegates his powers to him. So he sits and heads the entity tender committee, and that puts him directly in the line of conflict. The question is, did he declare this to the entity tender committee? Now, if he didn't declare it to the entity tender committee, did he sit or partake in decision making with regards to that specific contract? Now, there's also another level of influence peddling, where because he is a deputy director of the ministry and his relations have set up a company and they have come to bid for this contract and they know that he is related to them, there is an undue pressure that will be brought to bear on the people who have to make the decision, knowing very well that if these people don't get it, their boss may have the upper hand to do them. So that in itself is a covert act of influence peddling by himself, by virtue of his association with his sibling and his driver. So I don't know whether he understands the concept of conflict of interest, but he is stuck right in the middle of it. And what the Constitution says is that if somebody is found to be in contravention of this, what we are supposed to do, that is Article 287, we should report him to the Commission for Human Rights for him to be investigated. Unless the person makes a written admission of the contravention or non-compliance and cause the matter to be investigated. So either way, he needs to be investigated. But on the face of it, there's every evidence that there's conflict of interest. And it is so, especially when now he confesses that he led them to go and procure the planting for food and jobs. And that is the reason why when they weren't paying, even though he claims he's not a director of the business, why did planting for food and jobs write to him? So that shows the level of influence peddling. His name is not on any document, but his faith was leading the company to open doors for them. That is a conflict of interest.
Right. Now, you said that there were two elements here. So there's the conflict element and then the procurement breaches.
Yes.
Do you see any procurement breaches here?
The procurement breaches also stems from the fact that the law says that if there's a contract of a certain magnitude, it should go by either national or international competitive bidding. Now, he claims that this went by national competitive bidding. First, he should show to us where is the publication in the newspapers or on the website of the Public Procurement Authority that that contract was advertised. Now, when it was advertised, who are the companies who came to buy the bidding document? I find it very strange that a contract for the construction of various roads amounting to 12 million cedis or is it 12 million cedis or dollars? 12 million.
12.6 million cedis.
Good. Of that magnitude would be advertised and only 3 contractors will bid. Will buy the bid forms. That's the first problem. Buy the bid forms. Because sometimes people can buy, but because they do not qualify, they will bring their, they will not submit their bids. So 3 companies bought the tender documents and 3 companies submitted. Now, why is it that it's only 3? When it comes to quotations, the Act says that if you need to take quotations or to ensure that there's enough competition, the entity is supposed to take at least 3 quotations. So everything shows that in order to get to the semblance of competition, there must be 3 bids. So isn't it surprising that only 3 bids were bought, or bid documents were bought and only 3 bids were received? Now, who are those 2 other companies? Let's get into the ownership of those 2 other companies. Believe you me, you are likely to find that the 3 companies have a relationship. And that itself is a violation of the Act. Because it's bid rigging. I'm not saying that is it, but if we get into it, we might find out that it might have been bid rigging. where one company would have presented one person would present 3 different bids, knowing that it is one that will win. So there's supposed to be a charade, which is the semblance of competition, but in actual fact, there's no competition. Now, let's get into the Companies Act. Unfortunately, the new Companies Act has taken a certain provision which was in the previous one out, which I find very, very, very difficult to accept. But that itself has opened the door for corrupt practices and conflict of interest and all these things to happen. There was a provision for a company to state its business objects. So when I set up a company, I can state that it is a carpentry firm, or I am into the business of construction. What happens is that it establishes my capacity. So if I am registered as a carpentry firm, and I end up using the company to go and take a road construction business, it presumes that my professional capacity is in carpentry, not in civil works. So that itself becomes a point of disqualification when it comes to either pre-qualification or qualification. Now, he mentioned something about post-qualification. There's nothing like post-qualification. There's nothing like post-qualification in this Procurement Act. It is pre-qualification. Now, you have to establish. For example, they got a Ministry of Works and Housing license at some point, I heard. What category of contractor was he allowed by the virtue of that license? And when did he get it? And what capacity was he able to establish to the entity tender committee, based on which they qualified him to even receive the award? So there are various questions as far as procurement is concerned that we have to raise on this issue. And I'm sure if this thing goes to Commission for Human Rights, all of it will come out.
Interesting. So that would be your recommendation, a Shraj investigation at this
That
point.
is not my recommendation. That is the recommendation of the Constitution of Ghana.
Kobina Ata-Bedu is a procurement specialist. Thank you very much for spending time with us this morning. Interesting, right?
Yes, interesting. And I mean, Kobina has summed everything up. If you look at, and the laws are very clear. There's little to add at this point. He said everything.
Indeed, which means we can move on to our next conversation. And custodial sentences are the norm in Ghana. Whatever you do, if you have to be sentenced, it's either a fine or you're being locked up. In other parts of the world, there are innovative ways of ensuring that a person is sanctioned for their offenses, but society benefits. The person is also rehabilitated, and it doesn't cost you and I an arm and a leg. Finally, it's likely we might be able to do the same here in Ghana. It's an exciting time. We're about to discuss it after these messages.
Our money, when I'm money, our money, when I'm money, our money, when I'm money, our money.
Coffee in your cup. Yeah. Joy on the set. The Super Morning Show is always the best bet on Joy 99.7 FM.
What you say now? Squad, alongside Man and Morris, Babyface. What you say now? Our money, Africa money, I got the chop on fuga fuga. Wanna money, our money, Africa money, I got the chop on fuga fuga. Ile chop on nyanga nyanga, I got the chop on yafu 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 yafu. Wow wow wow, I got the chop on ya. Ile chop on fuga fuga, I got the chop on nyanga 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 nyanga. Boom boom boom, I got the chop on wow. Africa money, I got a job and go. Woman, they way, rich they enjoy. I say, how we go bridge, oh. The gap between account and the job, oh. I got a job and